Russell Crowe just dropped a bombshell about Tom Cruise, and it's not pretty. The Hollywood friendship that once seemed solid has shattered, revealing a deep, bitter rift. It turns out Crowe chose a side when Cruise's marriage with Nicole Kidman fell apart, and that choice would change everything. Now, years later, they had to face each other again, with old wounds still fresh.
What about your relationship with Tom Cruise? Have you worked with him before or seen him at all?
No, but I was really good friends with Tom from probably about 92 or so until he got divorced. And then when he got divorced, I was part of Nicole's settlement, and so we didn't really see each other. Probably the Australian thing. We haven't really seen each other since, maybe twice. I think we have a very simple and direct connection. I've always had a great deal of respect for what he does, and I'm really looking forward to being in front of a camera with him. I said to him a long time ago, when he asked me to do a particular movie, I said to him, I don't really want to be in a film where, we're on different sides. You're the good guy, I'm the bad guy kind of thing,
The Gladiator lead has always been known for his fierce loyalty. When the world watched the Mission Impossible star's marriage with Nicole Kidman unravel, Crowe did not just stand by quietly. He chose sides. The New Zealand-born actor took Nicole's side, and that simple yet powerful choice set the stage for a bitterness that would linger between the two men for years to come. The renowned action hero, known for his daring stunts and impeccable charm, is not universally loved. In fact, there are a few big names who find him to be more foe than friend. Among these names, Crowe stands out, not because of some petty rivalry over roles or spotlight, but because of the loyalty he holds for Kidman, a loyalty that went deeper than any Hollywood friendship. It all began in the early 1990s, when the action star and Kidman were still Hollywood's golden couple. They seemed perfect, the picture of love and partnership. Meanwhile, Crowe was carving out his place in the industry. The three of them formed what looked like an unshakable bond, until the divorce. The split between the couple was not an amicable one. It was messy, filled with whispers and drama that the public only got glimpses of. And in that chaos, Crowe made his choice. He stood with Nicole. The rupture was not just about friendship. It was personal. Rumors spread like wildfire. How the action hero, deeply entrenched in Scientology, labeled Kidman as a suppressive person, cutting her off from their adopted children. Whether or not the stories were true, the sentiment was enough to ignite Crowe's anger. He watched his close friend Nicole suffer, and his loyalty turned into resentment towards the Top Gun actor. Crowe was not the type to take such things lightly. Years later, fate forced the two men back into each other's orbits. The year was 2017, and they were both cast in the movie The Mummy. It was supposed to be a blockbuster, a thrilling reboot, but behind the scenes, tension simmered like a pot about to boil over. Imagine the energy on set. Two men, both powerful, both with their own histories, trying to share the screen. Reports from the set hinted at friction, a coldness that could not be ignored. Crowe, ever the loyal friend, could not forget what had been done to Nicole. Their work dynamic was icy. The Oscar winner, known for his fiery performances, did not hide his feelings. He was not going to pretend. There was something deeply human about his unwillingness to forgive and forget. Action icon, on the other hand, seemed to play it cool, even praising his co-star during interviews. He spoke of how amazing it was to work together, as if there was no past, no lingering grudge. The seasoned Hollywood performer played the part of the professional, but Crowe's silence spoke louder than words. During the press tour for The Mummy, the action hero gushed about working with his co-star, even claiming that they should have collaborated years earlier. But the reality was different. Crowe had reservations. He hesitated when approached about joining the film. Perhaps it was the ghost of Nicole's heartbreak. Perhaps it was Crowe's own distrust of the motivations behind the invitation. Whatever it was, there was hesitation, and it spoke volumes. Crowe later joked that he had been part of Nicole and her ex-husband's divorce settlement. He picked Nicole, and it was not just a passing sentiment, it was a stance. He had no room for the Hollywood daredevil in his life. No space for niceties or surface-level friendships. Even when they had to share scenes, Crowe kept his distance, both emotionally and physically. But despite their differences, the movie had to be made. They had to put on a show, and that meant facing off, sometimes literally. One of the most intense scenes in The Mummy required the two actors to fight each other for days on end. It was a grueling sequence, and neither man wanted to use a stunt double. The director described the scene as electric, a battle not just of characters, but of egos. One could almost sense the real-life tension bleeding into their performances, the anger, the frustration. It was all there, just beneath the surface. For 4 long days, the two clashed on set, fists flying, each refusing to back down. There is something almost poetic about that fight scene. 2 men, each powerful in their own right, each with something to prove. Crowe, unwilling to forgive, and his co-star trying to show that none of it mattered. The punches they threw might have been choreographed, but the emotions were real. The Australian actor's resentment, the Hollywood icon's insistence on professionalism, it all played out in that small, confined space on set. And yet, through it all, there remained a begrudging respect between them. Crowe could not deny the action star's talent, and the latter could not ignore the intensity of his co-star. They were rivals, yes, but there was also an understanding. They both knew what it meant to be at the top, to deal with the pressures of fame, to make sacrifices for their careers. And perhaps, in some small way, that shared experience allowed them to coexist, if only for a brief time. When asked about the Hollywood icon, Crowe often kept his answers short, his tone distant. He would acknowledge his co-star's work, his dedication, but that was it. There was no warmth, no camaraderie. It was clear that, for Crowe, the man who had wronged Nicole was someone to work with, not someone to befriend. The wounds of the past ran too deep. The loyalty to Nicole too strong. Fans often wondered why it took so long for the two actors to collaborate. Why, despite knowing each other since 1992, they had never shared the screen before The Mummy. The answer, it seemed, lay in their complicated history. It was not just about finding the right project, it was about finding a way to work together despite the ghosts of the past. Crowe had always been wary, always hesitant to get too close. And when they finally did come together, it was under a cloud of unresolved tension. Matt Damon and Tom have vastly different approaches to taking on those jaw-dropping, death-defying stunts that leave audiences breathless. Picture this: an actor standing at the edge of danger, teetering on the line between bravery and pure madness. These 2 men share that thrill, but in their own unique ways. It all begins with Damon, who once found himself in the thick of the action during the Bourne films. The Bourne movies were known for their gritty action scenes and the raw, physical energy Damon brought to each moment. But there was a secret lurking behind the scenes, a fear that Damon hadn't quite come to grips with, his fear of heights. He did not realize it at first, or perhaps he did not want to admit it. He threw himself into these stunts, harnessed and attached to cables, leaping off bridges and trusting the safety gear that held him back from the abyss. Yet, in a seemingly ordinary moment, Damon's fear came crashing to the surface. He found himself in Dubai, standing atop a massive skyscraper, with his wife by his side. The height was not just a number, it was an invisible hand gripping his spine, turning his body rigid. It was not the calculated leap with a harness around his waist. It was the raw, open expanse of nothingness below. Damon's mind froze, his body refusing to move. In that moment, he knew, truly knew, that fear had its hold on him. And then there is the maverick, the daredevil who seems to laugh in the face of fear itself. The actor who famously scaled the Burj Khalifa and clung to the side of a flying plane has become almost synonymous with pushing the limits. Damon's dinner with this thrill-seeker, years after that terrifying moment in Dubai, gave him a glimpse into a very different mindset, one where fear was not a roadblock, but a challenge to be conquered. Damon recalls that dinner vividly. This intrepid performer had just completed another one of his infamous stunts, hanging off the side of a skyscraper. Emily Blunt was there too, fresh off her own action-packed film with the same fearless collaborator. Damon observed him closely, eager to understand what made him tick. The stuntmaster had an intensity that seemed almost otherworldly. His eyes locked onto Damon's, with a focus that felt as if time itself had slowed. It was as though nothing else existed, only the mission, only the challenge. He spoke of dreams he had held on to for years. This particular stunt, he had envisioned it for 15 years. To him, fear was not something to avoid, it was something to master, a force to overcome with determination and precision. He had approached the safety expert, laid out his plan, and the expert shook his head, calling it too dangerous. For most, that would have been the end. A safety officer's job is to keep people alive, after all. But not for this boundary pusher. His response was straightforward. Find another safety expert. If the first one was not willing, he would locate someone who was. Damon could only marvel at this. Where one man's instinct would be to step away, this action aficionado took a different route entirely. He kept pushing, kept believing that the impossible could be achieved if only the right way was found. Where most people would think, that's too dangerous, his immediate response was to persist. It was relentless, fearless, perhaps even a little mad. And that is the contrast between them. Damon is the everyman, the hero we can all imagine ourselves being. Courageous, but human, with all the flaws and fears that come with it. He is calculated. He knows his limits and respects them. The maverick, on the other hand, is something else entirely. An unstoppable force. A man who does not just face fear, he defies it. He walks up to the edge, looks over, and instead of stepping back, he finds a way to leap. Alec Baldwin, another great actor, believes there is something extraordinary, something almost otherworldly about working with Tom. He is not just a movie star, he is a gravity-defying phenomenon, a comet that keeps streaking across the sky without ever fading. Baldwin emphasized that this larger-than-life figure was not born on the glitzy sets of Hollywood. No, he started out as an ordinary kid from New Jersey, just another face in the crowd. And then, boom! He was catapulted into the stratosphere, riding the success of risky business while still just a kid. How does someone like that behave? How does he stay sane when he becomes larger than life before he even knows himself? These are questions Baldwin couldn't help but ask himself. There has to be something holding it all together, he thought. Maybe it's a philosophy. Maybe it's something deeper. Maybe it's even a belief system. Something that keeps this icon grounded, that allows him to hold his head high when everything around him must feel like a blur of flashing lights and screaming fans. When someone achieves that kind of fame, it's like getting gum disease. The pressure of stardom, the constant race to the top, has to take its toll on one's perception of what's real. But here's what Baldwin realized. Whatever this megastar does, whatever secret recipe he follows, it's his own. Whether it's a strict diet, a special pillow, or something more mysterious, no one else can judge him. Baldwin made it clear. It's none of our business. People get carried away by rumors, whispers of strange practices, or outlandish beliefs. But Baldwin didn't make a big deal out of it all. If it's not hurting anyone, why does it matter? People will always be there to stir up the hornet's nest, to dig up controversy, to question what they don't understand. But in the end, Baldwin doesn't care about that. What matters to him is the work, the moments when the cameras roll and create movie magic. It was one of those days that could only be described as strange. John Hamm was about to cross paths with a legend, but he had no idea yet. The invitation had seemed innocent enough, a casual Sunday gathering at Jimmy Kimmel's house. Football, pizza, a keg, everything felt ordinary, like any other sun-soaked day in Los Angeles. The gathering itself was typical Jimmy. Comics, actors, writers, all mingling, cracking jokes, sharing drinks. But there was a rumor floating around that day, a rumor so ridiculous it could only be dismissed. A certain Hollywood megastar was coming, someone whispered. John scoffed. The idea of this cinematic titan showing up. It felt like hearing someone say Santa Claus would show up with presents. Jimmy was known for his elaborate pranks, and John wasn't about to fall for one of those. The whole idea was absurd. The most famous man in the universe wasn't about to casually stroll into a Sunday football gathering. Anyone who believed that had to be a fool, John thought. Then came the knock on the door. A hush fell over the room. Every head turned. A moment of disbelief, a collective pause. Jimmy's pranks could be elaborate, but this, was it possible? The door opened, and there he was. It wasn't an impersonator or some elaborate joke. It was unmistakably the action hero, the icon, standing right there. And he wasn't alone. He had brought his mother. The charismatic superstar had stepped into the room, accompanied by Mom Cruise, ready to watch football. The aura shifted immediately. The room, once loud with laughter and banter, seemed suspended in time. John couldn't believe his eyes. This wasn't just any celebrity. It was the most recognizable figure in Hollywood. For a moment, John felt like he had slipped out of his own body, watching himself from a distance, struggling to grasp that this larger-than-life personality was sitting in a living room, munching pizza, watching a dozen football games simultaneously. John exchanged only a few words with him, but it left a lasting impression. The man turned to him with that focused, unmistakable gaze, and mentioned how much he loved Mad Men. John thanked him, his head still spinning from the sheer surrealness of it all. It was a day etched in his memory, one of those strange, out-of-body experiences where nothing seemed real. Years passed, almost 10, before their paths would cross again, this time in a much stranger way. John was driving down the road when his phone rang. It was his agent. His agent's voice trembled with excitement as he conveyed the news. They wanted John for a role in the Top Gun sequel. John barely let him finish. He pulled his car over, his pulse racing. The answer was clear. He did not care about the details, the money, or the contract. None of that mattered. He knew he needed to be part of this. This was not just a movie. It was Top Gun, one of his favorites of all time. If they wanted him, there was no universe in which he could refuse. The idea of being asked to join this cultural titan, to be part of something that had shaped his own teenage years, was beyond his wildest dreams. John remembered himself at 14, sitting in a packed theater, watching Top Gun, enthralled by the jets, the speed, the intensity. And now, almost 40 years later, he would step into that very world, alongside the man who had defined it. John's scenes would be with the Hollywood icon himself. The thought was both thrilling and intimidating. The legend remained the same, intense, focused, the man who had walked into Jimmy's house years ago with such effortless charm. But now they would share the screen, and John knew he had to bring everything he had. Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise shared the screen in a legendary film, but what seemed like a dream couple to fans turned into a silent war behind the scenes. Brad Pitt was at the top of his game in the early 1990s, quickly becoming one of the hottest names in Hollywood. But one film almost ended it all. That film was Interview with the Vampire in 1994, where he starred alongside Tom Cruise. Despite the movie's success, things weren't as shiny behind the scenes. The long, cold days filming in London were draining, the studio was old and windowless, and the atmosphere weighed heavily on Brad. He often wondered if it was worth it. He even went as far as reaching out to a producer friend to ask what the cost would be if he walked away. The answer was a shocking $40 million. Brad knew he had to stick it out. It was a bleak time. He felt trapped, tired, and just wanted to quit. But in the end, he decided to endure, to push through, because quitting wasn't an option. It wasn't just the harsh conditions that made Interview with the Vampire difficult for Brad. There was also his co-star, Tom Cruise. The two actors, despite both being leading men, were as different as night and day. Brad described it well. Tom was like the North Pole, while he was the South. Tom came off with high energy, confident and intense. Brad was more laid back, someone who preferred to take things easy. This difference in personality made their time together tense. It wasn't that they hated each other, but there was a quiet sense of rivalry that Brad couldn't ignore. They were both young, both hungry for greatness, and both wanting to leave their mark on Hollywood. That subtle competition created a distance between them. They were teammates on screen, but never really friends off it. After Interview with the Vampire, the two actors went their separate ways. Nearly 3 decades passed without them sharing a screen again. But there was a moment, in 2019, when fate almost brought them back together. The project was Ford versus Ferrari. Director Joseph Kosinski envisioned the two megastars taking on the roles that eventually went to Christian Bale and Matt Damon. Brad and Tom even did a table read of the script, a rare sight that had fans holding their breath in anticipation. The movie was supposed to be about fast cars, fierce friendships, and a race like no other. It was almost ready to start shooting, but in the end, the budget couldn't be secured. And just like that, the chance to see Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise together again slipped away. It was an opportunity lost, one that would have brought two of Hollywood's biggest forces back for an unforgettable showdown. But the stars just didn't align. Though they haven't worked together since, the memories of their time on Interview with the Vampire left a lasting impact on both actors. Brad spoke openly about the difference in their personalities, how Tom's eager, driven nature was a lot for him to handle at times. There was no outright animosity, but the unspoken rivalry kept them from being close. Tom Cruise, on his part, never publicly commented on their dynamic, but the lack of future collaborations says more than words could. Brad admitted that, despite the tensions, he respected Tom's talent and his place in Hollywood. Tom might have been intense, but he was also undeniably good at what he did, something Brad couldn't ignore, even if they were never friends.